our webinar dealing with national apartment associations, and look forward to the conversation we'll have and hopefully some questions and answers afterwards. But a few things before we get started. The Common Interest Group is focused on helping contractors build their business and the industry to become more professional. And a couple of things that, ideas that were picked up during several of the conventions that IA members as well as contractors have been to have led into what our Common Interest Group calendar is containing for the next couple of months. So just to give you a little bit of a tease for what's ahead in February, mark your calendars on the 20th from 2 to 3 p.m. We're going to have, it looks like Toro, but talking about Business 101. So March the 20th from 2 to 3, we will have careers in irrigation as a topic. And then April, before we start really getting into the year of business, we're going to have Goldman Sachs talk to us. So just looking forward to what all we do have coming up. If there are questions, if there are suggestions, if you'd like to join in and become part of the CIG, take a little more active role, my email address, contact information will be provided later on in the slides, so have a pen ready, and look forward to talking to you all. Now I'd like to introduce John Farner, who is going to introduce our guest speaker. So John.
Mel, greatly appreciate it, and I'd like to thank you for all you've done with the Common Interest Group for Contractors as well at the Irrigation Association. Before we get off to today's presentation, I want to briefly go over some housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded. I've hit the record button. So right there is the website where this recording is going to be housed. It's irrigation.org/webinar_series. So if you want to reference any of the material discussed later on, by next week this webinar will be available on that site. Also, our speaker has kindly agreed to have a question and answer period with us. That'll be after the presentation. On your GoToWebinar toolbar, we have a section there for questions. Just please go ahead and type in your question. At any point during his presentation, I'll go ahead and gather those questions, and we can moderate that Q&A period after the webinar ends. I want to go ahead, for those who, all of you are members of the Irrigation Association, so you should be familiar with the organization, but for those who aren't familiar with our strategic plan, I want to go ahead and throw that up here because what we're doing here really fits into the strategic plan with the Common Interest Group, being that with professional development and advocacy as our core strategic initiatives, and this kind of encompasses both. Both myself and Fred, our speaker, are on the advocacy side of the equation, but what we do, what our organizations do on a daily basis really goes hand in hand with the professional development side, education, training, and certification. So hopefully what you learned today from Fred's presentation and the questions that we have afterwards will help on the education side and make your businesses more successful down the road. Many of you participated in the Common Interest Group survey that we had at the end of last year. And I want to go ahead and reference two of the questions that we had because I think it ties in closely with what Fred is going to be presenting today. And that has to do with water prices and the importance of water to water users the more expensive it gets. So we asked about, 112 contractors responded to our survey, which is a pretty good percentage response for those who we asked. And we asked, how have 2004 potable water prices in your market changed since 2013? You can see that 67%, or 76 folks who responded, said they increased, with 27% said stayed about the same. Note that 0% said that they decreased. So you can see the more and more value or monetary value is placed on water, the more that increases, the more focus that it's going to be placed on irrigation and water use throughout commercial buildings, commercial and residential buildings. The next question I want to reference asks if potable water prices have increased, how much did they increase since 2013? You'll note here that 83 respondents, or 89%, said 0 to 24%. And that's fine. But 10 folks, which is approximately 10% of the folks who responded, said 25 to 49% over a one-year period had an increase in water value of that much, which is very, very substantial. So 10% of the respondents, we take this nationwide, 10% of the irrigation contractors out there in the field have noticed anywhere between a 25 and 49% increase in the monetary value of water in 1 year is tremendous, which makes, I don't want to put words in Fred's mouth, but makes this issue even more important for his members going down the road. So with that said, I'll stop there and introduce Fred Tako, who is the Senior Director of State and Local Government Affairs at the National Apartment Association. Fred brings a wealth of knowledge to the table here, not only from his membership side, but personal side, having worked for the National Apartment Association for almost 2 years now, and before that working in a plethora of policy and congressional on Capitol Hill stints. But really, even before the webinar, talked about that a lot of his focus has been on the developer side and working with land management and things like that. So I think that he's going to have a wealth of knowledge given to us today, and really appreciate him joining us. So Fred, I'm going to give you the controls now.
Excellent. Here we go. I think, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
All right, terrific, terrific. Well, John and Mel, thank you for having me today. Anytime I get an opportunity to speak before another association, it's one that I always jump to because, you know, as opposed to speaking to to general audiences, when you actually get a chance to speak to an association with specific interests, particularly interests that match closely with your association, you always jump at that opportunity, not only for education purposes, but also going down the road for future advocacy purposes, because we do, as you indicated earlier, have a lot of similar interests. And I'll go ahead and get started with the presentation here, just to give folks a brief introduction of the National Apartment Association. Is an association with members such as yourself. It's a trade association. So a lot of the things that you do on your end in terms of the education, advocacy, and outreach, we do on our end. Our members are composed mostly of owners, managers, developers, and suppliers. And I don't doubt that within our membership there are a lot of crossover memberships with the Irrigation Association. So I look forward to discovering and building those relationships there. As we are as a federation, we have over 170 state and local affiliates across the country with over 67,000 members, which also includes Canada as well. We've already gone over what the association does, and very much like yourself, we have our big trade association, which may be of interest for your members as well, is happening in June. And I'll go ahead and give a little bit of a plug at the end of the presentation for that, but it's our education and exposition that we have every year. A little bit about myself. Just to skip over the top there on the on some of my most recent professional history, but for the folks here, it's more so on the development end. But talking to Mel and John earlier, on the development end, there's a common issue there in that development is primarily dictated in your ability to get water in, and also to be able to get the water out in terms of sewage. So water is something that hasn't always been an issue at the top of my list in terms of expertise that I don't have, but I've always circumvently have been able to address. Now, in terms of, just to give you a broader picture of the rental housing industry and where we stand, it's one of the few industries that actually has federal, state, and local impacts. There are very few industries that actually have that. So whatever happens in Congress directly affects us. Particularly whatever happens in state houses affects us. And like I said, on the local end, which is the primary end on the development side, has a direct impact on our industry. Legislatively, we're one of the few industries, and I say one of the few, and being mindful who I'm talking to. With you folks that deal with water, understand this as well, where impacts can come from everywhere. We have over 50 landlord-tenant laws for every state. There is no one universal landlord-tenant law. So we have 50 different models, if you will, across the country that we're constantly on the outlook, and that's in terms of our interests as an industry, that's very high at the top of our list. But if and that goes along with the tenant-oriented legislation that we see every year. Development is also a very big part of our industry, in that development shortages have its consequences not only for our members, but you can imagine when the composition of not having enough housing, having a number of folks, having more people going after those few housings leads to legislative consequences, and that's when we start seeing issues like rent control, just cause evictions, and things of the like. But following very closely with that is on the regulatory end, and this is mostly where our interests in energy and water lie. This doesn't get the news that legislative fronts take, but these are issues that are very important to our industry, because I don't know if we have any renters on the phone or folks that have rented in the past. You have a number of different scenarios in which energy or water is either paid directly through the tenant, or in the classical sense being paid by the property owner and redistributed amongst tenants. So those are resources that are that we're constantly mindful of, because they constantly change. Now, for indirect threats, and this is the third and final, is state budgets. What we're looking at right now, what's really keeping us awake at night is that, unlike the other real estate industries, my brethren, if you will, the rental housing industry has done really well since the economic downturn, and for a number of reasons. The number one is that with the economic downturn, we've produced a number of renters, and by that, the industry as a whole has done very well since. Unfortunately, since coming out of it, legislatively, we found that we've been the target of as a revenue source for many cities as well as states. So that's something that's very high on our list. And so water and resource management falls right in the middle there, and it's right in our sweet spot, and it's where we'd like to stay and talk about. But of course, we always get pulled on the legislative and then on the indirect threats ends for state budgets. Now, more specifically, multifamily's interest in resource management. There's always conservation's always been an issue that's been important for us. As an industry, we have classes, we have education classes for that end, but it's only lately that it's that importance has been matched by the public's interest in this. And as John can attest, when the public's interest gets quirked, then well, all of a sudden we start seeing adverse legislation move our way. So again, while it's always been important to us, it's really now only starting to get the attention that it should have been getting all along. It's going to come as no surprise for anyone, and that slide that John had put up is matched by our members as well, that energy and water costs are going up. They're not going down. And that primarily affects our community interest areas and the amenities that we provide for our residents. We've seen increased regulations in places we haven't seen before. I'm sure your members are very aware of the EPA's recent waters of the U.S., or otherwise known as WOTUS impacts. These are things that very much affect our industry, and the most damaging interpretation of those rule changes. If you can imagine an apartment building being identified as a point source pollution. So that's the worst way that you can interpret that, and something that we have to be mindful of. But there has been, while there hasn't in the past, there has been a lot more nationwide studies, if you will, that highlight the importance and the possible savings associated with energy and water use. The most recent is the Fannie Mae study that they had done specifically for multifamily, which I'll get into a little bit later in my presentation here. But all of these factors have an impact on the property owner's bottom line. Next slide here. Here's some highlights from that Fannie Mae study. Again, it identified that water's not getting any cheaper. One of the study points out that U.S. residential water costs rose by 75% in current dollars from 2000 to 2012. You'd be hard-pressed to find any other commodity to increase that quickly in that short a time. And it specifically pointed out, as you can imagine, for the rental housing industry, there's not just one homogeneous product out there. You have product that is turn of the century, and you have the modern day product at the other end. But they've been able to quantify that in identifying that the least efficient properties use 6 times as much water per square foot as the most efficient properties, and that's a pretty wide disparity. And hopefully, looking at that, you guys can see an opportunity there, and I'll identify some future opportunities later on in this presentation. The result of which is higher water costs means lower net operating income, which for our members is very important, because it's not just operating your current property, but looking out for investments and growing those properties. Investments in waters can positively affect property performance, quality, and affordability. Much like water, apartment units are very much a commodity, and how you can position your property in terms of its water efficiency affects what the ultimate sales price is. It's like when you're buying a car and you can prove its fuel efficiency. There's a value added to that which you can tack on to the final price, and that's something our members are very cognizant of, is having the property that they have, knowing how it's viewed, how it can be properly positioned, either for its current use or for its future sale. There's good news for the folks on this call. Of the 5 water strategies that Fannie Mae had identified, 2 of them had to do with irrigation. So that you can see on here, I won't go over the entire list, but 2 of those are probably the 2 of the most that your membership is most aware of. Now, it was a great study, but unfortunately the study had some shortcomings. Because energy is a larger expense, more of the study was dedicated to strategies on conserving energy. And the part that was dedicated to water was more towards reducing indoor/resident water use, not specifically for irrigation. And there were reasons for that, and it was and a lot of what the Fannie Mae study had done had mirrored a lot of what we see as an industry, that most properties are not able to report their indoor and outdoor use separately. Some of the stats that they have on here, 70% reported data was metered together. 30% only produced indoor data. And of that, the outdoor data that was accounted for, it didn't just account for irrigation. It accounted for laundry as well as pool use. So it was lumped under the title of amenity. And like I said, a lot of what Fannie Mae had discovered mirrors what multifamily has seen in irrigation. When I had agreed to do this webinar some time ago, I going into it, knowing that water is such an important issue for our industry, I had agreed to it immediately, because it was, off the top of my head, I was going, yeah, there's going to be a wealth of information on this. I can study up on it, and I can look really smart in front of folks. But on further digging, unfortunately, so much emphasis has been given towards indoor and residential use that the outdoor irrigation water use has really been an afterthought. We have the luxury of having a number of certified apartment maintenance technicians that I was able to draw upon, and I was able to do actually a quick little survey in terms of some of their thoughts on this. But to a man, it was they were a little bit embarrassed to say, you know what, we dedicate so much of our effort towards indoor and residential use that there's just that gap. We know about it. We know our contractors, but in terms of an overall strategy, it's just missing for our industry. And a lot of it it's really on the tail end of things. It's not on the dog end of things, because you can imagine what prompts a lot of members into action in terms of in dealing with irrigation issues. It's not until a regulation comes down that a local regulation comes down that prompts you to engage in those measures. And it really depends on your location. I mean, the Southwest states have a different reality than the Northeast states when it comes to their need to engage in this. And it also comes down to your building type. Newer buildings are built more efficient than older buildings, but on the same token, the vast majority of the units that are out there are of the older variety. So you can't take advantage of using that new state-of-the-art building that was built that now sits on the corner as a model. You have to understand the product type is pretty diverse. And unfortunately, at the end, even for the newer properties, not many properties are equipped to distinguish between indoor and outdoor use. And asking why. Again, going back to our maintenance technicians that primarily manage this for our properties, the bottom line, and this is pretty intuitive, is that irrigation is a cost that they can control. And there's some, I took an informal survey of the technicians, and going from positive to negative, some of the strategies that they use. On the positive side, the first thing that they do is they water less. And when they can, when the irrigation system allows for it, they improve their existing irrigation system. Now, right in the middle here is on the plus and minus side, because it is fairly difficult to do, to completely change the landscape of the irrigation. And the last two, just looking at it, just from raising rents is anathema for our industry, and it's very difficult to do, and that's you want to use that as the last resort. But to the most difficult, to replacing an old irrigation system. Now, you guys as an industry may be able to educate us on that, but just on a knee-jerk reaction, talking to our maintenance technicians, that seems like their heaviest lift. It appears that's the last thing that they want to do, because it would be so invasive to the property. You guys may be able to give us some education on that and let us talk us down from the ledge and let us know that it's not as difficult as it may appear. But hopefully as I'm going through all of these, between our irrigation experience and some of the informal survey, hopefully what you're seeing here is a lot of, what we're trying to convey is there's a lot of opportunity, in that you don't know what you don't know. I was talking to a friend of mine, and this happens a lot when we learn about other aspects of other industries and how you're able to parlay what you know. I mean, it's kind of like, your iPad. You never really knew how much you needed an iPad until you got it. So hopefully the education that we get through our association with you enlightens our industry in that, we didn't know what we didn't know. And some things, while we may think are difficult, aren't really all that difficult at all. And quite frankly, to bring it back to more of a business sense, even though common area interest on properties only practically amount to 10%, we can't really quantify of that outdoor use, of that irrigation use, how much can be saved and how much can contribute back to our bottom line. So there's a lot of opportunity for the Irrigation Association and the industry as a whole to educate multifamily on the possible savings that we could be producing. Now, let me go ahead and take the association hat off and put the policy hat on, and this is where John can intimately understand, in that because we are an association, we are an industry that is subject to a lot of regulation, either from regulators or from legislators. Anything that we can do, that we can show that we are proactively working to save resources, to save water, to use less water, that is a great foil for us to have. So when I am going in talking to a legislator and advocating on behalf of the industry, I can point to a number of different strategies and education opportunities that we have for our members, and can show them that we are proactively. This is an issue that that's important for us. We're proactively doing all that we can, and hopefully, by virtue of that, we can talk them off the ledge, so to speak, in terms of passing onerous regulations that, quite frankly, are knee-jerk to whatever they read in the papers. Now, going back to the slides here in terms of opportunities, there's a great opportunity for your association to define savings, what those savings opportunities are for the multifamily industry. I mean, talking to our maintenance folks, there's, when it's indoor, they use faucets, low-flow toilets, flappers, aerators, all the like. But when I start talking irrigation, they go silent. So this is a great opportunity to educate and introduce us and educate us on those savings opportunities. We currently do not have an irrigation maintenance curriculum. Again, we have it for indoor, but we don't have it for outdoor. And there's also the trade association, trade show side of this, where we have one of the largest trade shows for the multifamily industry, and it happens every year, and it's a great opportunity for your members to get out in front of our members, not only from the vendor sense, but also from we have a number of education sessions where maintenance technicians from across the country come. One of the great things that Fannie Mae had done in here is they've recognized that while is on the financing side, while the industry has the desire to do that, having the desire to do that is not enough. You have to be able to have the financing to be able to make those upgrades to, especially large-scale improvements to your property. So they have green financing loans available through Fannie Mae, and just doing a cursory search of different states that have strategies for irrigation for multifamily. There's a number of rebates that I'm sure that you are aware of that can make the improvements that you would propose to multifamily a little more appetizing, because the bottom line is if we can get some of that money back, that's really helpful. And I've already touched upon this a little bit, was the joint legislative and regulatory efforts. Multifamily is that rare bird that, depending on where you're at, we get charged commercial rates for water, or we get charged residential, and there's no consistency there. And you can be right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but by virtue of the size of your pipe going into your property, that jurisdiction will label you as commercial, and it makes absolutely no sense when you look all around you is residential. But that's how these water boards have evolved over time, and I'm sure it's based on their bottom line as well. But by virtue of that, I can imagine, I can foresee there's a lot of joint legislative and regulatory efforts that both our associations can get involved with. And this is a selfless plug here. This is as I was talking about our education conference, and the location doesn't hurt us very much. It's in Las Vegas this year. So for any of you that have an interest in participating in that, please don't hesitate to give me a call. It's in Mandalay Bay. I'll be there, and we have one of the largest trade show floors, and hope to see you there. With that, I'll go ahead and conclude my presentation and give the mic back to John.
Fred, thanks a lot. Really appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and, although we love looking at the ad, change
Sure.
back over to me here. So we have gotten some questions here, which is great, and I want to go ahead and get to those real quick. But first, as we get more and more coming in, I have a quick question for you. I'm not sure if Mel does or not, but I'll go ahead and start if you don't mind, Fred.
Sure.
The irrigation industry, we've been working a lot on green codes, green building initiatives, whether it's LEED or green globes or the construction code having their green component to it. Have you guys or your members been involved in these at all, or have you seen how it's affected your members and how they manage their resources at facilities?
Absolutely. We've been very involved with that. And as a matter of fact, you know, how many times can you actually say with the new code release, particularly the 2015 variety, it's something that was there were a number of changes made to that pleased the industry. The two things, we couldn't say that about the 2012 codes, but 2015 and just codes overall in general, we play a very active role in its creation. And all the way down from its creation, all the way down to its acceptance, working with our local bodies of government to not allow them just to accept the entire code as it is, but to be a little bit more particular in terms of what each code means to each jurisdiction. So yeah, we're very active in that, and we've had a lot of good results. Like I said, particularly in this new iteration of 2015.
Mel, do you have any questions while you're alive, or not alive, but live on the phone?
Well, I am alive, and yes, I'm live.
Yeah, glad to hear.
Honestly, I'm a small contractor, so I have not experienced much of what you spoke of. I've got some apartment complexes I'm trying to work with, so this is some good information to go in and possibly help them. So insightful, but well beyond what I've been doing. So thanks for taking me out of my scope.
Very good.
So
I'm going to go.
Like I said, this is this was very much well outside of my scope as well, in that going into it, I thought there was going to be a lot more wealth of information, but from my discovery is that there's a lot of opportunity. So I look forward to that.
So I'm going to go ahead and get to some of these questions that were asked, and if folks on the line have any additional questions, please feel free to send them on, type them in, and we'll get to them. I think we have plenty of time here to get to as many questions as possible. One of the first questions that we received really has to do with perception and perception of your members, and the perception that I think you said changing the landscape on a property is difficult. Do you know why it's perceived that way? Do you know if anybody that has gone through this process or any other information on that, or why it's viewed that way?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to think of what when you look at property maintenance technicians at a typical property, imagine what's at the forefront of their mind. At the forefront of their mind is responding to the issues of their residents. So they're running around all day. They're fixing leaking faucets, replacing ovens, doing all the maintenance things. I mean, just think about your own home, where you have all these things that you have your honey-do list, and you have to get through all of them. Well, it's multiplied when you're at a multifamily property. So by the time you actually get to the irrigation portion of your to-do list for the day, it's something that you're not as familiar with as you are your day-to-day, and two, you just don't know what the cost layout is going to be. So you got this maintenance technician who's got, all right, I don't really have time to research this, but I know this is an issue. Property owner is telling me the water bill's starting to get too high, but I just don't have enough information on this, and I don't really have the time to get this thing out to bid. So really, it's good. While it's of importance, it's just one of the many things. And I don't know about you, but there's I got a number of staffers here that that sometimes the most difficult thing is the one that's most unknown, and unfortunately that's the part that your to-do list that gets kicked down. So it's really just looking at what they're doing, and unfortunately just trying to raise that level of priority, and that is sometimes a big ask. And particularly when there's only one or two of them on a property.
So we just got another question that kind of addresses this a little bit, but some of our members do deal with apartment complexes, and a lot of times work with a sustainability person that is focused on these kind of issues. And from what we've seen, even on the water agency side, sometimes you have a conservation manager who is at odds with the overall goal of the agency to sell more water, not conserve water. Yeah. And in some instances, I'm sure on the apartment side, it's your sustainability managers have different perspectives as the day-to-day site manager or the operations manager. Have you seen this kind of this in your experience in working with your members?
Well, I can go ahead and let you know that having a person dedicated for sustainability is rare. That is very rare, and it happens for it's kind of an inverse relationship. I've seen sustainability managers for these larger, newer complexes, but when you think about where a sustainability manager would be best used, it would be for the smaller garden-style apartments that have a larger footprint of land. So while I have seen sustainability managers, I have not seen them I have not experienced working with them very much. And when I do see them, it is they have a they don't have they're not just dedicated to that one property. They're managing a number of properties, and so you can imagine that's where the conflict with the on-site person comes along. Versus if I could characterize it, is one that thinks more practically versus the other that is more broader goals oriented. And you can imagine that those two heads would butt frequently.
Mm-hmm. Pardon me, this is another question that we received. One of the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis is promoting the value of the landscape. If we are talking to somebody about water use efficiency, if that person we're speaking with does not believe in any kind of value to the landscape whatsoever, any water placed on that landscape is a waste of water in their minds. Yeah. With the apartment industry kept in mind here, what value do your members put into the landscape? And if there is value from your members and from your members' tenants, are there situations where if you have an increased usable landscape, would that be directly tied to an increase in overall rent or fees associated with rent for your members?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to imagine that with having apartment units is being a commodity. Anything that you can do to best position your commodity before the next competing commodity better situates you. And so in this particular case, it has a lot to do with curb appeal. It has a lot to do with resident satisfaction. So it does play, from an aesthetic standpoint, plays a very important role. And again, being able to attract and retain those tenants. Now, is it from a as a government affairs professional, it's hard for me to be able to quantify what that actually means to bottom line sales and actual retention. But I do know that at least from folks on the leasing side, it's a very important component, because how you portray yourself in a very short period of time and able to attract those tenants is very important. Is just as important as having a nice lobby, having a pleasant experience in the leasing office, amongst other things. It's that overall sales experience. So yeah, it is very important and is very highly valued. But to be able to quantify it, I don't know if our industry is quite there in being able to do that.
In terms of measuring your resources used, and of course in our minds it's water, in talking to your technical folks or your experience with your members, in terms of how you measure water, is it done differently both inside your property and outside, or how do you guys measure your water use in that aspect?
It absolutely varies. There are some units that are sub-metered, that they can measure resident use to the ounce, as well as a meter sub-metered outside, whether it's going to the pool or how much is going into watering the landscape versus. So it just runs the gamut. There are some that are just absolutely positively they're geared to be able to measure every drop of water used versus others. It's just one big pipe, and what they're doing is water allocations, and so then that's for resident as well as property use. And unfortunately, that's what the Fannie Mae study had discovered as well, is that it's just very few of them can actually allocate and account for it. They know when it goes up, they know when they use more, but in terms of and they engage in these strategies in which what they think they can't control, and that whenever a unit turns over, they'll install the low flow toilets as well as the water fixtures and whatnot. But I hate to say it, but it's more developed on the residential end than it is on the irrigation end, and that's the unfortunate part. But it was very important to be able to find that out.
I was really encouraged to hear you talk about future partnership opportunities, both in advocacy, education. I think there's a lot of education that is out there, both from our industry's perspective and your industry's perspective, working with one another and learning from one another on the needs and wants of your industry relating to outdoor water use, and, our industry teaching you guys about irrigation. An example is sometimes, this is one of the questions we had, but sometimes some of the newer, and I'll define newer as a system installed less than 40 years ago, doesn't necessarily need to be fully replaced, just can be upgraded, or some components of it, fixed / replaced without tearing out the whole irrigation system and installing a new one. With that in mind, and not knowing, exactly how many members, if you do know, you can let us know how many of your folks you've heard of doing this, et cetera. What's the best way for our individual members to interact with your individual members? Is it a mailing list? Is it attending the show? Is it working through our two organizations? What's the best way to go about doing that?
Well, I personally believe it's kind of a cop out. It's to do a little bit of everything. But we have so many, as you noted, we have over 170 affiliates across the country, and so one of the best strategies that I would definitely recommend is having your members in each individual state or each individual jurisdiction reach out to that apartment association, because that apartment association conducts classes. There isn't a single weekend where there is a course. A course isn't being performed to do indoor, but unfortunately, that same isn't true for outdoor. I think reaching out not only to the apartment association in that area. If you don't have an apartment association in that area, the realtors are also are very active on the rental housing front. So at least from an aggregate perspective, the shotgun perspective, that's going to be your biggest bang for the buck, because not only will you help that affiliate create an education class, through that education class they can create disperse the knowledge that they need to about how savings can be achieved. And you're going to find that most of your quote-unquote large members with those garden-style apartments that are of the 5 to 1,000 unit variety are members of that association. That's the great thing about this association, is that we do attract a lot of the larger professional members, and by virtue of having a lot of the larger professional members, they have the resources to be able to dedicate to thinking about, above and beyond their daily to-do list to projecting more out into the future and being able to project their costs out a little bit more better. So that's probably the best strategy, because again, like I said, we have over 170 plus affiliates across the country. They have their own organized staff, and they have their education classes as well as their own trade shows that that can feature your members. So that's probably the quickest way to get the word out.
I feel like I'm just rapid firing questions at you. You're doing a great job, Fred. So
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Have you guys, I don't know, maybe not on the policy side, but anecdotally, have you heard of any of your members using any kind of water catchment systems or using reclaimed water for any of your water uses on site? With the rain barrel or?
Quite frankly, only in Southern California, because they've regulated it.
Yeah,
the quote-unquote purple pipes. For a lot of new developments, they have that option, and so because they have that option, they do take advantage of it. But really, I only really see that in highly regulated areas, and one of the most highly regulated areas you're going to get is in Southern California. But that needless to say, it doesn't exist in other jurisdictions. But those are the most visible. So whenever you see a new development going up, you see the purple pipes as well as with the potable pipes and whatnot. So it's pretty well accepted there, and I think with a little bit of education can easily be translated for other areas.
Yeah, and I think you speak to education. We just got a question regarding talking about the value of trained professional irrigation specialists. And I don't want to assume too much, Fred, but it sounds like you guys just haven't touched upon the options that are out there and talking about not only that this education exists regarding irrigation, but taking it to the same level to talk about using a trained, educated contract or a consultant to work with on some of these irrigation issues.
Oh yeah, and like I said, going back to that, while there's a big hole in that, there's also a big opportunity, because with these local apartment associations, when they do conduct the class, they don't conduct the class with their internal person. They end up hiring a vendor to do that, to conduct that class. So. It's rather than just doing it and learning it, it's getting it straight from the horse's mouth and just really getting it out there, unfortunately.
Very good. Mel, do you have any other questions at all, any other thoughts?
I'm just sitting back thinking, wow.
Taking it all in, huh?
You just never. I've got one apartment complex that I've just talked them into getting a separate meter run for their irrigation system, and they were trying to do profit analysis, and they did a great job, but the owners, it was just a hard sell. So hearing the other potentials, it's always great to hear somebody outside of Kansas City, Missouri, and how they're the challenges that they're facing, and whether they're the same or different from what we have. It's nice to compare notes, and that's the best takeaway that I've gotten, and some of the little anecdotals that I can use to possibly push them over the edge. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, these are bottom line folks. I mean, as soon as you can demonstrate the value that is, saving X number of dollars, not only for now, but showing that water resources is only going to get more expensive, not going to get any cheaper, and that in the long run, this is something that's going to impact their bottom line. So, everyone responds well to a heavier wallet.
I want to go on record here, because we're being recorded, so it's going to be on the internet forever and ever, long beyond our time here on Earth. I do appreciate your willingness to work with the Irrigation Association, and just by viewing some of the other questions that have gone in, there's a really desire out there to promote certified trained professionals as options for you guys, your members, to work with, to look at varying ways to manage your irrigation systems, place value into the landscape, et cetera. So I just want to make a commitment to you that the IA is going to be interested in working with you guys on that, Fred, and of course looking to this CIG under Mel's leadership, and to getting some suggestions on how we can do that specifically with contractors in the states and working with the local apartment associations. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there because, like you said, not much has been done thus far.
Terrific.
Good. So if there's no more questions, I think that can wrap up our webinar. I want to thank Fred for his time with us today. Like I said, this will be on our website. I also want to reference Mel's earlier comments regarding our upcoming webinars for Point of Connection. You can see those on the website right there. The next one is on February 20th. That will be conducted by a representative from Toro, as Mel mentioned, with March and April being the ones after that. You can go ahead and sign up for all of these at irrigation.org/webinar_series, and that is where also this webinar recording will be housed sometime next week. There is my contact information as well as Mel's if you're interested in talking to any one of us about the Irrigation Association or the Contractor Common Interest Group. Please feel free to reach out to us. Again, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to Mel for his leadership with the CIG, and thanks to Fred for his time with us today. So thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Great.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.